Okay, we have a presentation tonight on charter school oversight, and one of the things I'd ask us to do, and especially board members, is let's see if we can let Janet and Chris actually get through the presentation before we rudely or not so rudely interrupt them as they go through this. So, who wants to kick this off? Janet, you're going to kick it off? I'm sorry.
I'm over here this time.
Okay.
Surprise you.
Yeah, okay. Got it. Let's
I'll
go
ahead.
for it.
Anyway, first of all, thank you. And good evening. Looking forward to this presentation on charter school oversight. My name is Christopher Tikel. I'm the Director of Charter School Operations, and I have Janet King as the Director of Physical Services. And so we go to the next slide. Legally, under the state law, oversight from a chartering authority is limited to at least identifying one staff member as a contact person for the charter school, visit each charter school annually, ensure that each charter school under its authority complies with all reports required by charter schools by law, monitors the physical condition, as well as provides timely notification to the department if the charter is revoked or if the charter school will cease operation for any reason. And while on face that looks really simple, as we've delved into many of the complex issues of the charter schools, you see that our oversight and the capacity to provide oversight has expanded broadly. And we'll go into the next slide, because really when you think about it, oversight is provided by two offices. First of all, it's the business services side, which really does an outstanding job on the business side, and which Jen will go into more detail. But also on my side, by visiting the sites, looking at the curriculum, looking at the facilities, dealing with parent issues, concerns with their boards, both positive and negative, as well as the petition process for new petitions and renewals. So at this time point, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. King for the business side.
Thank you. We're really happy to have the opportunity to finally be able to share with you all the things that we've been doing in the background with the charter schools over the last many years. This slide, the first slide that we're going to look at, okay, is gives a sense of our overall funding attributed to district charter schools. The first number, the $29,173,000, is the revenue, the local control funding formula revenue for all of our charter schools, which includes both resident and non-resident students. So it would include those students that are our students, would be within the boundaries of San Bernardino City, and any other students from outside the district. The second number, the 22 million, and this is from 13-14, is the resident only. So if those students weren't attending the charter schools, they would more than likely be in our school system, and that those students are generating about $22 million in revenue for the charters within our district. So once our approach now for reviewing the petitions for new and returning charter schools is first blush of a review of petition is to look to see that they have the understanding of what the business operations side is of a charter school. And the first step we look at is we look at their systems for attendance accounting and accounting systems to make sure that they have something that's going to be viable to do the work that needs to be done. We look that they acknowledge the statutory reports and timelines that they have to meet in terms of they're statutory. They need to get them into us, we need to get them reviewed and then pass them on to the county office. We look to see that they acknowledge that they do have reserve requirements, and we also look to see that they're identifying whatever retirement programs they're going to have their employees involved in, whether it be PERS or STRS or Social Security. We look to see that that's identified as well. We look at their 5-year budget and enrollment projections. First, we look to see if they're reasonable. If we look at the projected revenue based upon the ADA that they say they're going to have. In other words, do they understand how the funding mechanism works? Does the budget for salaries and benefit, does that make sense given the ADA that they have? Does the class size seem appropriate? Just checking reasonableness tests all the way across the board. The next piece is we look to see if they have a special ed MOU mentioned in there, who the SELPA is going to be, who's providing the services, because if it's going to be us, then we need to make sure that we're involved in those processes. And again, we look to see that the district is insured, named as an additionally insured by the charter, so that in the event there's some sort of a liability on their part, that we are protected. And then we look to see that there are detailed procedures for closure and transfer of records with the charter, should that occur. So once we have a charter approved, it's on board, and annually thereafter, we send an annual reporting calendar to the charter to make sure that they're aware of all of the due dates throughout the entire year. These are all business services due dates. They include attendance, accounting, budget reports, interim reports, selection of the auditor, the independent audit, the unaudited actual reports. We also send reminders of these reports being due as the due dates approach. And we send the annual reporting calendar out in July of each year. So they get it at the beginning of the year. And if you look in your binder and the materials that are in there, I think it's in the third tab where we actually have a sample of the reporting due dates, and there's about 4 pages of due dates that are listed there. Moving on to attendance accounting, this is probably one of the most frequent contact points within business services, is the charters are required to submit monthly attendance reports to our office. Our office then reviews them and then forwards them to the County Office of Education after we've reviewed them and validated them. This is probably one of the really critical steps because ADA is what we call the bread and butter for the district. It's the bread and butter for the charter. So we need to make sure that what they're reporting is accurate. We also have staff go out and do periodic audits and review of their attendance records. We actually do provide support to them if they need assistance in learning how to do the reports or making sure that they're doing them accurately and that they're meeting the standards of reporting when they request it. We don't necessarily go in and intervene, but we do audits and we provide assistance to them when needed. The next slide, the 2013-14 Charter ADA. This is the ADA that drives the funding of the charter schools. This, of course, this is 2013-14. This is their P2 ADA. This is the ADA that they were funded on in getting their LCFF funds. Of course, it's listed by school. This funding does include the resident and non-resident charter ADA for the year. And then in 14-15, we are already noting a return of students to the district, an estimated 451. It's subject to change as the year moves on because our actual funding date is P2, which is in the spring. But right now, we're looking and seeing a trend that there's definitely a return of students to the district. But of course, with the closing of the Academy of the Inland Empire, we would have anticipated there would be a fair number of returning. The next slide being the charter school student enrollment for 14-15. So this is the information that we have now. It's the first section is the district authorized charter schools. It reflects the grades that are served by each school, the accreditation status, the UCCSU approval if it's applicable, and the decrease that you see in the total SBCUSD, what we believe is due to the closure of the charter previously mentioned. And then the bottom section is charters authorized by other districts. These are charters that are operating within San Bernardino city boundaries. They are authorized by other districts, surrounding districts, and as you can see, one of them, I know the Norton Space is authorized by the County Office of San Bernardino, and some of the others are authorized by adjacent districts. Now, property taxes, district LCFF funding is reduced by property taxes in determining our net state aid, the amount of money that we get directly from the state. The charter schools get a portion of the district property taxes, and each month the district is required by statute to distribute their share of the in lieu property taxes by the 15th of each month.
Ms. King, Before you go further, can I ask a question? Just-
Sure.
I thought that districts weren't allowed to charter schools in other districts.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
I thought that, for instance, I thought we couldn't charter a school that was located in, approve a charter that's located in Rialto Unified School District's boundaries. Can we?
I'll let you want to respond to that one?
Actually, there's a lot of concerns and consternation over that very issue. First of all, if it's what's considered an independent study school, the school can operate learning centers in each of the adjacent counties of the district that they are authorized in. And there's also another caveat in the charter school law that says that if we approve a charter school and they cannot locate facilities adequate enough for themselves within that particular district, then they're allowed to operate the charter school elsewhere as well.
But
And then,
in this case, the schools that you cited that are within our boundaries that we did not approve and the county did not approve, would that be Alta Vista Highland and Alta Vista San Bernardino?
that is correct.
Who approved those charters?
We've had legal research into Alta Vista, and we're not aware exactly who has chartered that. We've actually even contacted CDE as well. But they are operating several learning centers throughout our district as well as several other districts.
Okay.
And our students are going there?
That is correct.
So to continue on with the property taxes, the property tax distribution is adjusted each time we have new information on the actual property taxes that are to be estimated for the district or the ADA for the district and/or the charters changes. So each measurement date with any of those we have to adjust the calculation and how much that we send out to the charter schools. And just like the district, the in lieu property taxes are an offset to the district LCF funding. And it is from this distribution that we do monthly that we withhold a portion of the property tax distribution for our oversight fee. So we're collecting the oversight fee as we go rather than waiting until the end of the year. It seems to minimize the pain for everyone. This is just a summary of the in lieu property taxes that were transmitted to charter schools in 13-14. The total was $1,270,000. For financial review, when reviewing the district financial reports, the County Office of Education can see directly and access any of the financial data of the district. And the district, when reviewing charter financial reports, has no ability to do so. So when we ask for documentation from the charters, we rely heavily on that documentation to derive an opinion as to whether their financials are reliable. So we do a lot of tests of reasonableness and just validation or verification of any information we can when we get those reports. We do look at their assumptions, all the information that they provided, and test everything that we can, and oftentimes we request additional information to clarify. For the interim and budget reports, these are all projections. There's nothing that's in concrete at this point in time. So our review requires that we validate the revenue based upon the projected ADA and comparing the projected ADA to actual ADA trending. We look and see if it's reasonable. Sometimes we get some kind of pie-in-the-sky numbers, and other times we get charters are projecting levels. So we have a wide gambit of how they approach their budget and interim reporting. We look at the salaries and the positions that they have budgeted to see if they're reasonable, if it measures out with class size, and that the salaries make sense in comparison to the ADA trending. You don't want to see ADA going way up and salaries going down, because that tells you that they're understating their expenditures or way overstating the ADA. Something's amiss. We look to see that they're able to maintain adequate fund balance. We look to their debt and other obligations to see if there's any issues that could be pending with solvency. We look and make sure that their payroll taxes are filed and that their retirement contributions are properly reported. And then we look to see if there's anything that just flags out as being in violation of ed code. So it might be something like personal expenses or related party transactions that you can spot sometimes just by reviewing some of the documentation. One of the other things that we do for the benefit of the charters is we complete certificates of good standing when the charters request it. Many times they'll go to a lender, they'll submit an application for a loan, and then the lender will contact us and ask us to complete an affidavit saying that this charter is in good standing and that there's nothing pending against them. Normally, our process is to disclose anything that we think is questionable or could be an issue for the future, so that if the lender does decide to lend money to them, that it will have been a full disclosure and they will have lent money knowledgeably that there might be issues. And in some cases, we've been sort of surprised at some of the loans that have been granted.
Do we incur any liability if they're not able to meet their obligation, if
Well,
we certify that they were in good standing?
The first rule is that we have to show that we did due diligence in our oversight. The second piece is by doing a full disclosure of all of the questionable things, or if there's a financial condition, we do list it on the document so that we make sure that the lender is fully aware. Then it becomes their responsibility.
Okay, so we're not liable. Okay, thank you.
One of the last, at the end of the year, we have the unaudited actuals and the annual audit for each charter. The district on the unaudited actuals is required to validate the beginning balances and validate the calculation of revenue for the charter given the ADA. The district does know the ADA of the charter because the ADA comes through us. So there are certain things that we have to verify, and the report won't be accepted by the county office if we haven't made sure that the numbers are accurate. And then the second piece of that is that the charters are required by law to select a state-approved auditor, one that is knowledgeable in the business of school business and how to audit that and report on it. And the next piece is that once the audit is complete, we look to make sure that if there were, read the audit report, see if there's any irregularities or any findings that have been noted, and that we look to make sure that any audit adjustments are included in subsequent financial reports. So for our charters now, and just as the district, the audit report is due to our office by December 15. So we're anticipating seeing those results for 13-14 coming very soon. Excuse me. So the last...
Janet,
Yes, ma'am.
Janet, has everyone turned in their reports to you by the 15th?
The report, okay, now your
The audit
audit
report.
reports, it's December 15th, so we don't have them yet.
But they're coming in?
They should all be here on time, yes. Now, the last piece in this chain of events is that once we find and we complete our documentation, we send an official letter to all the charters with a detailed analysis and review of whatever document it is. So if it's interim or budget, we will not only review the revenue and expense and all the pieces, we'll give a certification as to how the charter performed in that particular report, and we share it with the Charter Schools Oversight Office. And if there's anything that's an irregularity or a concern, then we work together to see if there's any way to remedy it, and if not, then we move to potentially the notice of violation piece. Now, one of the questions that had been posed was, what does it cost the district to do oversight? The charter oversight that the district collected in 13-14 was about $354,000. And as you can see, we have the cost of the Charter Oversight Office, fiscal services, accounting services, our legal costs that are directly related to charters. And then there's some other costs that we really didn't try to define, and those would be when we just do a walkthrough. You're taking folks from special ed, from nutrition services, from M&O, and pulling them in to do a walkthrough. And so there are other costs associated with the charters, and in particular, when we have something that comes up where we'll have a board subcommittee, we don't try to quantify the time specifically for those activities. But the total normal, regular costs of oversight are just under $500,000, giving us an excess of $145,000. Now, before we go on to the,
Can I ask a
Sure.
question? So that's in addition to the 22 million? This,
yes.
so it's an addition.
So before we go on to the Charter Oversight Office presentation, I just want to quickly call your attention to the dashboard, which is included in your packet. The dashboard has been created as a document so that you can readily compare the performance of the charter schools against each other, and even to some degree against the district.
Excuse me, Janet, is that in the booklet that the board would have received earlier?
Yes, it's in the first tab. It says
And
dashboard.
Did we have a couple extra booklets in case a board member needs a copy of those?
Sure.
Or does all the board have theirs?
Do we have any board members that need them?
I have it. What tab is it?
The first tab
And
says
you're on
dashboard?
the one that says dashboard? The
Yes.
tab in the folder says dashboard?
Anybody else need one?
Real good.
That was really good.
And does the public have a couple copies,
The-
other members?
The dashboard is included in the
Yes.
packet, and it's actually
Okay.
the first
Thank you.
document that's in their packet.
Thank you.
So the dashboard, the first page of the dashboard is actually the district's information or statistics. So if you look in the upper left-hand corner, the bottom line is it gives, just identifies the district and/or the charter. It gives some data as to what type of students are served. So in the case of the district, we have elementary, middle, and high schools. We have, lists a few of the programs we have. And then in the bottom left corner, we have some graphs that depict the AYP and the API measurements over the last several years. Now, we anticipate that for future dashboards, that information will be replaced with some other information, as those measurements are not going to be utilized further. Yeah. If you look at, the AYP is, if you look at the charters,
There it is, the next one.
the charter schools actually have more of the data. We didn't somehow we weren't able to get the AYP in the same block there. But the idea there is that most of this has been comprised of financial data and statistics, and we're looking for some measurement data for performance in terms of program and educational achievement that we can include there in the future. This is sort of our first run at it to make sure that we have something that gives you the ability to look at, one, how the district is doing, but also how the charters are faring in comparison.
Are these demographics to date? Student demographics,
I believe those are 12, 13,
12, 13?
yes. So when you look to the section on the right at the top, right, the ADA and enrollment information is there. So what we have listed is the projected ADA at budget, actual ADA, enrollment, and unduplicated pupil count. What we were trying to show here is, and not so much for the district, but for the charter schools, is many times a charter will give a projected ADA, which is what their revenue is based on, at budget, and then as the year progresses, you can actually see that actual ADA sometimes has been significantly higher, and in a number of cases has been significantly lower. So we're just looking at their performance in terms of projecting what it is they're going to be doing, how they're going to be serving students, and how well their projections pan out throughout the year. The second section down is the summary of financial report certificate. Now that basically is just going to signify that when we did their review, the review of their adopted budget, first interim, and second interim reports, what sort of certification we gave based upon the information that they submitted. Generally, we highlighted anything in red when it was not positive, or if there was a conditional approval. Then the last section on the right, on the bottom, is operations per audit and independent report. That gives a just very summarized version of their beginning balance, their revenue, their expenditures. These are per their audit report, if we have it. If it's, so in the case of a new charter school that was just new last year, we don't have actual data yet because that report hasn't been submitted. And it also tells whether the auditor gave an unqualified or a qualified opinion, if they met their instructional minutes, and if they met the reserve requirements. And anything that was a concern for us where we didn't give them a positive certification, or if they didn't meet reserve requirements, or if they had a negative ending fund balance, we highlighted those numbers in red. So, like I said, the intent of this document is just to be able to look at how each per charter performed on its own over a period of time. Some of them got off to a little rough and a rocky start, and then they've improved and they've done better, and some of them have, you know, ridden at an edge of being, you know, on, having questionable whether they're going to continue to be able to operate in an ongoing basis. So with that, I'm going to turn, unless we have questions, sure.
What's, when it says like AYP math and then the target math, what is that, a target demographic, is that a target student base? What is the target?
The targets are the scores that were set by the federal law that, in other words, the percentage that was expected to be proficient or advanced at that particular year when you have a target. Then there's also called what's called safe harbor as well, that if 10% of the students in that particular category make the growth, then they would be considered an SH. We did not have charters that met the safe harbor. That is correct.
Can you clarify what it means when it says auditor's opinion says it was unqualified?
Sure. An unqualified opinion means that they didn't have any reservations about saying that the financial statements fairly present the condition of the charter. A qualified would say something to the effect of, our opinion reflects that everything is good except for. That would be a qualified. So an unqualified is a good rating.
It's good. Unqualified
It's
sounds
kind
neg-
It's counterintuitive, yes.
I think,
Okay.
I think it's also though important to, in present this information, compare it to our own statistics too. So, you know, Mr. Gallo asked, how many of these schools met their target? How many of our own schools met the target though?
And one, the document, if we started going, excuse me, school by school, is going to get fairly large. And we do know, again, that the API and the AYP scores are not going to be relevant moving forward. So we're going to come up with a new measurement or a new set of data that we hope that's going to give you a better comparison.
But just to be
with
clear,
new data.
even in general, in terms of the years you guys have listed here, what percentage of our schools met the target?
I would have to, for the AYP or the API.
I just think that type of information is important. If you're gonna list what the charters are going, you should have some kind of comparison between our own. Or else, why else would you have, you know, concern for alarm if you're saying, you know, only concern would be we're doing so much better than the charter schools, so.
And I agree with Danny on that piece, because in reality, if you look at the $22 million, they're servicing our students, and those are the in-district students, so they are helping and serving our students. And some of the reports, some schools can definitely do better, but other schools are actually doing equally or better than our schools. So it's just looking at, not necessarily is that they're taking away the money, is that they're servicing our kids. It's just making sure that the schools that are not necessarily doing doing better than our schools, then looking at how we can help them do that. If not, then find some other solutions. But they are servicing our kids.
And part of that I will answer during my presentation as far as the academic performances, and when we come up for renewal, how we look at the charter school test scores, because we take that into concerns and questions as well, and I'll cover that in more detail.
Okay, Chris-
Dr. Marston, we are moving to a new type of assessment. We no longer have, we're going to have API or AY, right? AYP.
Well, we'll have API,
We'll
but
have
it'll be
API.
formulated differently, and I
Right.
can defer to Maddie Zamora to talk to you a little bit about the composition of what that'll look like.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry, is this on? Yes, at the state level, they haven't given us a clear outline as to how we're going to be held accountable yet.
Right.
We know that that right now, what they're discussing is this being a baseline year for student scores and school scores based on the new Smarter Balance assessment. But to say this is how the schools are going to be ranked or the district, we haven't received notice yet. We're waiting
So
for that to
That's
come.
for API?
API and
So
AY.
AYP will no longer exist?
We're not sure yet.
Oh, we're not sure
We
yet.
know that at the high school level, they're still going to continue to use the high school exit exam. So that is going to continue, and it will change. The high school exit exam may also change, but it hasn't been determined yet.
Right. I
What,
haven't- yeah.
what we may need to do is with the charters is look at internal assessments that they will use to gauge their own progress until we get a formalized system.
I have another
And
question.
if I may, just on the
Okay,
on the
okay,
API
okay.
piece, with the summary API you have as a district overall, I believe that our overall for 12-13 was at 726. Somebody refresh my memory. It's hard to tell
That
from
is
the
correct.
graphic, but I believe that was correct. And given that, we would find in the charter schools that 2 charter schools did exceed that API, which would be Hardy Brown and Soar Academy. Those 2 would have exceeded all the other charters would have been lower than that API rating. So if you wanted to have a comparison of how are we doing as a district, how are the charter schools doing if you use API,
Right.
you could do that. And as Janet explained, we'd be very happy to present a comprehensive report of district trend data compared to charter school trend data. We could do that.
I have another question. What are the red flags that pop up where charter schools are in trouble? Like what, first financially and then operationally? I mean, do you know, I mean, I can see them, but do you have them identified?
Well, there are a number of things, and sometimes taken in combination, they become overwhelming. And I think sometimes we'll have a charter that they may have some issues such as not being able to meet a reserve requirement, but they have a positive fund balance and everything else, and the trending and the ADA looks like it's okay. So if they're just short of a positive fund balance or meeting the reserve requirement, we may not say, wow, we need to, close them down. If we have a preponderance of things where it looks like there's improprieties in expenditures, if they have not only not meeting reserves, but they are unable to maintain a positive fund balance, their ADA is not materializing to the extent that they projected. So it's a lot of things taken in combination. An inability to meet a reserve requirement, say in a year of substantial cuts, or in their initial year, it's not good, but it's not something that we would necessarily recommend a closure or a violation
Right.
for.
And
When would we get your recommendation to revoke, or not revoke, but to start the proceedings
within-
for revocation?
It would, to me, it's when it becomes eminent or it's something that is, for lack of a better word, like a criminal, it's a violation of law,
Uh-huh.
then we would definitely move forward with a notice of
Okay.
violation.
Because I was piggybacking on also what Abigail and Danny said in terms not just of academics, but, providing the service for our kids. And if there are red flags that show that they're not using the money wisely and not really attending to our kids, that's concern for me.
Because we do a fairly, and this is from the financial point of view,
Yeah.
we do a fairly stringent review. We've had a few charters who have gone through some tough times, but they've sort of heeded our concerns, given responses, made adjustments, and have pulled out of situations that didn't look like they were going in the right direction. And now they're operating from a financial standpoint, they're okay. So we do work with them where we can. It's when just seems like there's not a lot even that we can do to help them help themselves.
So we have the financial aspect, but then the operationals as
That's
well.
correct.
And that's probably the most, I mean, both are
Well, you're
significant.
going to go through that now, Chris?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah, let's let them finish.
Just before we pass on to that, that was one of the things is with the dashboard was to provide more of an objective tool. Normally, when we come before the board and we've had issues with charters, it's always kind of a negative experience because there's something that's going on and we're bringing in notice of violation. So bringing you this dashboard also shows you that there are some charters that are functioning fine. There's no real issues or problems that we're bringing to light. And so we get to actually share that with you at this point, too. Like that.
So then I'll go ahead and start with the site visits. And what you really stated is very important, and that's the reason why we actually go out and visit the sites individually. We visit the classrooms. I get to know the teachers and meet the teachers, because if there are financial issues, they begin to come to our office through vendors not being paid, concerns about the STRS not being met, teachers not meeting payroll, and once again, if they're receiving breakfast services, they'll generally contact our office. And then when I receive those contacts, I generally notify Janet's office as well, and we work to conjunction and say, well, how much do they owe? And then we start putting together. And the first thing we always do is we contact the charter schools when we have those issues, because you're very right. A teacher who's not receiving a paycheck is generally not a very effective teacher, and therefore it does impact the student learning and impacts the student programs. Also, the charter schools that are having financial issues tend to cut back on services. You try to call the school and you find out that the phones have been turned off, or they're not receiving any new paper supplies or textbooks. So those are the red flags, and that's when we really begin to look at the charter school, and that's when we first start with our letter of concern, which I'll go into later, and then on to the revocation process if necessary. But most of the charter schools do pull through it, and that's something that we're here to do, is to support them and give them those warning signs before they hit the iceberg, as we say. We're going to let you know it's up there in front of you. Take action now. I do visit each of the classrooms. I visit the teachers. The focus is on the curriculum, materials, and lesson plans. And this is where I have to really go back and look at the charter petition as it's been approved. For example, when you look at SOAR, SOAR is very much on character education, community projects, and as you walk through the classrooms, you see that evident. So they're living to the terms of the petition, as well as you're doing with Hardy Brown. Hardy Brown expects longer school day, more emphasis on all the subjects. They also have a huge parent commitment and volunteers. And as you walk through the school, you see that evident. So they're living up to the terms and conditions of their charter. So it's just as Janet said before, we're not there to catch you. We're there to support you and get good ideas. I mean, I've looked and observed SOAR doing one-on-one with the iPads, as well as at Hardy Brown using Chromebooks. And they're doing very effective lessons. They're impacting with the Common Core standards and how they're transitioning to the Common Core standards. There's a lot that can be learned and glistened from the charter schools. And in fact, when the Charter Schools Act was first passed, that was what the charter schools were going to be. They were going to be the innovators and try new ideas first, and then districts could be adopting them, because often, as you said, it's a lot easier to experiment with a small group than it is for an entire district of 50,000 students to experiment something that does not work well. And so that's the reason why they do hold a viable spot in our community and with our students. Another aspect that's very, very important, especially with the petition, is looking and making sure that they're providing differentiation instruction. Because one of the things that in their charter petition, they have to address all major subgroups that they're to serve. And in our district, we are really paying particular attention to their English Learners program. We're looking at differentiation for at-risk students, differentiation for the special education students and the 504 students, as well as gifted and talented students. and making sure that the teachers understand that and the sites understand that as well. And I'll get to it, but just in a second, in your packet that you see, we've created a rubric that we're using to evaluate so that now we're going to be henceforward providing a score to those schools so they know exactly where they stand on all the issues, whether it's facilities, physical, site visits, and the governance of the school itself. And that's and that's the renewal and ongoing evaluation document. So we can immediately tell whether a school is doing great or is at risk. And we're going to be creating a cut score so that when we come to you with a renewal request, we will say this is their score. And it'll be very cut and dry and very objective as to the recommendations of the staff in regards to renewals. Brown Act is very important. I go to all the board meetings. I attend the board meetings to make sure, whoops. And the reason why we want to do that is the governance of the school, just like the governance of this board, is critical to the success or failure of a charter school. And by getting to know them, I understand whether they allow time for public comment, if they're posting the agendas appropriately. It was asked of, do we provide information regarding the board meetings? Our website provides links to all the charter school websites so that anyone accesses and can access their information as well. We look at agendas. Are the agendas being followed? And most importantly, is the board in its official capacity understanding the physical concerns and the expenditures of the school site and where the money is being spent? And very often the back office provider does provide an updated financial report to the board, and we want to make sure that that information that's being presented to their board is being presented to Janet's office as well. As I said, do the approved expenditures match the reality of the school? And it's very, very important because often they'll want to buy new textbooks, and the board will say that, and the school says, sure, we're going to do it, but the reality is they don't have the funding at that time and point. So then they have to talk about borrowing and how much the borrowing is going to cost. We also at my office receive and take any of the parent concerns. It's not our job to solve the parent complaints, but what we do is we document the complaint and write it down, because in case there's any violations of laws or if the child's being abused, we are still mandated reporters. But also we want to make sure that the parents know that they can come to us. We've authorized, they're parents of our community. We want to make sure that their concerns are noted. But then we also refer the parent back to the school. We also provide them with the board information and their dates so that they can address their concerns to the board, which is their right. And then we also contact the charter school, and we let the charter school know this is the person who came in, this is their complaints. We get generally the charter school side of the story. And then we said, well, we're sending them back to you to resolve the problem. And then afterwards, we do a follow-up with the parents to make sure that their problem has been resolved. And I think it's done very well in resolving a lot of the complaints that used to come to the board just by having us provide that service. It was asked of this at the previous board meeting on what happens with suspended and expelled students. Students suspended can return to the charter school after the suspension, so typically they do. However, if a student is dismissed from a charter school, it's not working out, parent doesn't want them, they can just return back to a district school with regular enrollment. And we really work with the charter schools to make sure that the students were notified, because by law they have to notify us, the residents, if they've not completed that semester. And we also want to make sure we contact the parents and get the students into a school. Some parents go to another charter school, many of them return back to the district school of choice. When it comes to an expelled student, the district has several options. The first thing is that we can accept the expulsion and the student will be referred to county schools for placement. Another one is to return the student back to a district school under terms and conditions. And if we do this, then youth services must provide a report to the board, and the board must approve those terms and conditions. It's provided to you, as well as the third option, which we do not like to do, which is to overturn the expulsion and return the student back to a regular classroom. So we work very closely with the charter schools on what they expel students for. If the student brings a weapon to school, by all means, we want that expulsion procedure followed, but we're very careful to make sure that they're not expelling students for disruption or defiance. Because once
How
again,
often does this happen, Chris?
since we've met with the Charter School Association and the quorum, it's dropped dramatically. It used to be a regular ongoing occurrence, but I checked with Mr. Culberson, and he says the system's working really well. And maybe, if you're typical about maybe 6 to 7 expulsions per semester, it's a very, very low number of expulsions. Most of the expulsions, I would say, would probably come from PAL, but PAL has a very special set of circumstances, as well as, and then the independent studies, such as Options for Youth, rarely expel a student.
Is there ever time that the student stays home
You mean as far as,
for the year, expulsion?
I've not been made aware of that, because once again, they're still under the mandatory compliance, education compliance laws. Typically, just to let you know, though, if a student does choose that, they typically enroll into a homeschool type program. They're still enrolled in a program.
Mr. Tikel, I apologize for interrupting. I know we got a little later start.
Yes.
And we have a 5 o'clock closed session scheduled. It's 5 o'clock now.
Yes.
And so what I might suggest is the board, you do have the presentation in front of you. You may have some questions, so why don't we maybe jump to questions if we can now, and allow you a few moments to do that, and then we will go into closed session as close to now as possible.
Yeah, and I'd say, Chris, if you have any, some of the charts I see on special education and things that you didn't address yet,
Right.
are there maybe a few bullet points that you really want to hit on for us to know now?
I think the most important thing is that if I was to say the charter school meetings, the consortium is an absolute necessity. We work with the California Charter Schools Association to create that, as well as the charter schools. And when you talk about speed of trust, that's what we built. We've built trust between ourselves and the charter schools. And just as a board to be aware of special ed, the charter schools that belong to our SELPA, we consider them, they're like a school of the district, and we accept that liability. And it's very critical that, as Mr. Tillman said, we provide training and work with them as well. And we have done that with both Woodward, Newman, and we've set up training with SOAR and PSA as well.
I do want to mention that when Dr. Marsden mentioned the two schools, Hardy Brown and SOAR, there's also Public Safety Academy that's in 700s above, as well as Options for Youth that are in the 700s and above. So it's 4, maybe not, compared to 13 schools, not a great number, but it's, if you compare that maybe with the district, I'm not sure how that calculates.
And I just wanted to mention this. When you look at, for example, PAL may have low test scores, but however, they are a designated ASAM school, and as a designated ASAM school, they're exempted from many of the API requirements because they do take on many students that are very difficult,
Right.
and they do an outstanding job. So when we look at that, we look at the students as well. I will go through and look at student test scores, and I will look at their test scores prior to coming into the district, prior coming into the charter school. How are they doing and how are they doing now? So we want to do what's fair by the student and the school too.
Barbara?
Yes, I just wanted to commend you, both of you, and for your, for the tab on charter evaluation and renewal assessment is very thorough and very comprehensive, and it speaks to our integrity and our commitment to our families and our students. And I just wanted to commend you for that. And also, the rubric. I think you developed that, correct?
I developed it with assistance from the County of Riverside as well as County San Bernardino and LA Unified School District and Adelanto.
In Adelanto. But it's very thorough, and I'm really, very thankful for all the work that you guys have done, so. I wanted one last question. For English language learners, that is really, really key, because I believe the ACLU suit that was brought against districts. And I know that we were cited as a board, as a district, and it was mostly from charter schools, correct?
That is correct. All the students identified in the suit as San Bernardino City students attended charter schools at that time.
Right.
There were not any district schools.
So we're going to have to be really stringent in terms of reviewing how they address English language learners. Thank you.
Bobby, and then Danny?
Yes, I have a lot of questions, but I'm going to keep it to 3 because of the time. Number one, under your costs on page 17, where your oversight costs, you didn't put anything down about if the charter school does not have the capability to attend to a special needs of a student, and we have to cover that cost, say it's like for an IEP that they can't cover. Is that something that is extra above this, or did you account for that somewhere?
What we do is when the charter school joins our SELPA, we retain all their special education funds. They do not receive any funding for special ed purposes. So
Okay.
therefore, the IEPs, the school psychologists, the testing, whether it's RSP services support, all comes to back to the district, and we provide the services. And one of the important things to note is that charter schools by law have to admit all students that attempt to enroll if they have the space available. So if a student is, let's say, an SDC student and comes in, joins the charter school will still notify the district, they enroll the student, and then what we do is we have a placement IEP, and then we'll do an offer of FAPE, which is generally an SDC classroom within the district, because it's more cost affordable for us to do that than to set up SDC classrooms at all the charter schools.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And then I had another question. For those schools that you said that they were authorized by other districts, but they're in our district, what is our responsibility as far as oversight to those schools? Oh, you're smiling.
Well, it's a very contested issue at this time and point. I think legal counsel would be best to address that, but as of right now, we have no oversight obligation to those schools whatsoever. We do not provide special ed services. It's just as if they're just a district unto themselves.
But there are students.
That is the issue.
Okay, yeah, that would be a concern to me, too. And then my last question is, for those schools that have independent study, how do you verify exactly what their attendance is, so they're not really in school? Do they have to provide information to you somehow?
That is through their work samples are collected, and ADA is based upon the work they're doing. For example, Options for Youth is a independent study program. Their ADA is generated by the amount of packets and work that's completed by the student. So if the student's not completing work and still just shows up at the center, the school doesn't collect any ADA. So it's very vital, and that's the reason why Options for Youth is very, very stringent upon having the parent come in. They sign that contract that says that they will do the work, and if they're not making progress, they will dismiss the student and return them back to the regular education program.
Thank you, and this is very comprehensive. Thank you for all the work you put into this, because I know this is hours of time. Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby. Danny, and then Margaret?
Yeah, first, I want to thank Mr. Kell and Ms. King for the report, good report. You know, I guess I have the same concern in terms of the charter schools that aren't under the district's approval. I think that we should try to pursue some way of notifying those parents and letting them know that they are working outside of the district's approval. Because a lot of times, just because the charter is located within our district, parents assume that we've given the okay for those schools. So if there's some way we can get information pertaining to that and send out information to the parents, I think that would be a good idea.
Now, one of the things we've done for the charters that we have authorized is we present them with the plaque saying this school is authorized by the San Bernardino Unified School District.
Okay. And then my last thing, you know, I really think that parents are informed, and parents like to be able to make choices. So no one's snatching the kids off the streets and forcing them to go to one of these schools. The parents are deciding on their own to put their kids in these alternative schools. So to me, that's a good thing. The worst thing to do is to force parents to, or take away choices that parents have. So, you know, when Dr. Hill first got on the board, she said, we got to find ways to reach out to parents and convince them that our schools are the ones of choice. She made something about cookies instead of spinach or something like that. But I think that's still the case. And I really think we do a disservice when we minimize the fact that parents are making choices on where they want their kids educated. And if they have concerns about, a lot of times it starts out, the kid is in one of our schools already. They have a lot of issues, and they look for options. And I know for a fact, when the parents put their kids in another school, they don't just take for granted that that's going to be the best thing. If that's not the best thing, they'll bring their kids back. That's why 10% of the students in these charter schools came back to our district. So it's sad that we haven't found a way to build the confidence in the parents that we can do a better job than these other schools. And at the same time, they found schools that they feel better about. And I, to this day, don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think, my goal has never been to find a way to get rid of charter schools totally. From the beginning, I don't think it was well thought out. To this day, there aren't any laws or rules that dictate how much expertise that they have in school finance, and that is one of the biggest problems we have in terms of charter schools. The average layperson thinks they can get rich off of it. As soon as you get someone who creates a school and they think they're going to make a lot of money of it, those are usually the schools that fail, because there's not a whole lot of margin for profit in schools. So I just hope that we continue to work with the schools, because in the end, the bottom line is this: those are our students. And those students, most of the charter schools that we're working with don't have high schools, so those schools are going to come to us. So I think it behooves us to work in partnership and try to find ways to build an educational system that benefits those students the most and the best. And I think that's what it's all about. I mean, if any of you on this paper, if you say we're spending an extra $140,000 on the students, to me it's worth it. A lot of that's based on our own decision. We spend extra money on legal counsel and those type of things to ensure that things are being run properly. But in the end, I think it's a good investment in our kids. Thank you.
Thanks, Danny. Dr. Hill?
Yeah, thank you. First, I apologize for coming in late. I knew there was a meeting, but I'm late. The other one, I just wanted to say thanks to Fatima for being here. And I have her number, so whenever I have a concern, I call her directly. And we remind her, because she's with Charter School Association, that these are our students and that we're all working in collaboration together. But my one question is on the board members. Chris, do you know if most of our board members are at the charter schools are local people? I have a concern when we have board members throughout the state and other states and what have you.
It depends. I know that some of for example, Hardy Brown has a mixture, because they have schools up in Sacramento as well as down here, but they have representatives from the San Bernardino area as well as up in Sacramento. Options for Youth is they have, I think, one member that's local, and then once again they have several charter schools. But for the most part, most of the charter schools, whether it's New Vision, SOAR, Excel Prep, they are either people that live in the area or they work in the area. We have a lot of personnel from Cal State that sit on the charter school boards, and that goes the same for PAL as well, and Newman and Woodward, all local.
Mike,
Thanks.
I just want to make a quick remark. I appreciate what you said, Danny. I also have another vision that we as a district can become more creative and provide the options in small schools for our kids as well, and provide multiple pathways for them as well, and that we would be, the district of choice given all the options that we have. Because $23 million is a big hit. And I did the math, $80,000 per teacher. That's about 285, 86 teachers that we could be providing in class sizes, being even smaller. So that's just my perspective.
Okay. Any other burning questions, comments from anyone? Ron, did you have something?
I just have a quick request. Take a look at the chart here. We have a chart here that breaks down our student population, but there is no chart for all the charter schools. So I'd be curious as to why certain charter schools are doing so well if they have this same mix. That's it.
Good observation.
Good point. Anybody else? Okay, if not, let's go into closed session. Good to see you all.